The name Hannibal Lecter is synonymous with serial killing and cannibalism, being one of the most iconic and feared villains in horror history. The character of Lecter first appeared in Thomas Harris's 1981 book, Red Dragon. The film rights to the novel's story and characters were bought by movie producer Dino De Laurentiis, who hired Michael Mann to direct an adaptation, retitled Manhunter, released in 1986. Manhunter details the investigation of ex-FBI profiler Will Graham as he attempts to track down serial murderer Francis Dollarhide, known in the media as the Tooth Fairy. Manhunter's narrative emphasizes the struggles of Will Graham as he reopens the darkest realms of his mind. Graham had previously caught the serial murderer and cannibal Dr. Hannibal Lecter, who had forced Graham's early retirement after nearly killing him. In his psychological assessments of the Tooth Fairy, Graham consults with Dr. Lecter, a former psychologist. Harris claims the initial inspiration for Hannibal's elegance and intelligence was Alfredo Bali Trevino, a Mexican doctor who had killed and mutilated a man and who Harris had interviewed in the 1960s. Several casting options were considered for the role of Lecter, including actors Brian Dennehy, Mandy Patinkin, John Lithgow, and William Friedkin, director of The Exorcist. However, the role went to Scottish actor Brian Cox, who based his performance on serial killer Peter Manuel, who murdered 8 people in Scotland in the late 50s. Cox's Hannibal is less refined than future portrayals, being brash in his arrogance.
When I have to call my lawyer, they bring me a telephone. Would you like to leave me your home phone number?
In his performance, Cox created a serviceable supporting villain audiences would detest and fear, but with little screen time to intrigue them further. In fact, the film literally runs away from him. Manhunter plays as a modern crime thriller typical of its time and of Mann's filmography, making it an interestingly adequate adaptation. However, the film ignores the deeper qualities of Harris's story, most notably its references to William Blake's painting series, The Great Red Dragon. Even after preparing a scene which displayed Dollarhide's tattoo of the painting, Mann decided the killer's fantastical red dragon persona undermined his moral conflicts. Unknown to the filmmakers, these themes of transformation and the character of Dr. Lecter would become more prominent in Red Dragon's sequel, The Silence of the Lambs, leaving Manhunter as a cinematic footnote. The Silence of the Lambs, published in 1988, saw cinematic adaptation in 1991. Although actor Gene Hackman was originally slated to direct and star as Hannibal Lecter, he eventually dropped out and director Jonathan Demme was hired. The film tells the story of Clarice Starling, an FBI trainee who develops a rapport with the incarcerated Dr. Lecter in order to gain insight on the serial killer known only as Buffalo Bill. The dramatic focus of the film is rooted in its characters, through Starling and Lecter's quid pro quo exchanges.
Quid pro quo, I tell you things, you tell me things.
While Demme originally sought Michelle Pfeiffer and Sean Connery for the lead roles, Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins were awarded the parts as second choices. Hopkins' performance portrays Hannibal as equal parts sophisticated and vile. With ample screen time, Hopkins' portrayal, unlike the Lecter of Manhunter, mesmerizes and intrigues viewers to this day. Overall, The Silence of the Lambs is a cinematic masterpiece. In his direction, Demme relied heavily on his actors, composing much of the film with stark, hypnotizing close-ups in which the actors stare slightly off camera or directly into it. Demme's directorial style emphasized the more intricate subtext of Harris's story. As a young woman functioning within the predominantly male world of homicide investigation, Clarice deals with judgmental gazes of the men around her, including her colleagues, the detestable Dr. Chilton, and most derisively, Hannibal Lecter. Furthermore, the psychosis of antagonist Buffalo Bill is shown to be rooted in gender identity conflicts, continuing the theme of transformation that began with Francis Dollarhide's demonic persona in Red Dragon. Silence's deeply interwoven performances were aided by a talented supporting cast, gothic labyrinthine settings, and an atmospheric score. In turn, the film earned 5 Academy Awards: Best Screenplay, Actor, Actress, director, and picture, solidifying it and Lecter's place in popular culture. Rights holder Dino De Laurentiis had passed on The Silence of the Lambs due to the box office failure of Manhunter. After the franchise's newfound success, however, De Laurentiis was eager to cash in on a follow-up. After a long wait, Hannibal, Harris's third book in the series, was published in 1999, with a film adaptation directed by Ridley Scott released in 2001. Hannibal's intricate plot involves Mason Verger, a former victim of Hannibal, who uses Agent Starling to lure the escaped Lecter away from Europe and back to America in an attempt to exact his revenge. Hannibal marks the first time Harris reused a protagonist, relying heavily on the pre-established relationship between Clarice and Lecter for dramatic purpose. With much of the story focusing on the European escapades of Hannibal, who had become the franchise's anti-hero protagonist, Mason Verger stepped in as the story's supporting villain. However, even after several changes and revisions, the script still wasn't able to find the narrative balance of previous incarnations. That said, the film's story still has several strengths, with its most interesting sequences involving Inspector Rinaldo Pazzi as he attempts to correctly identify and provide proof of Hannibal's residence in Florence, Italy. Pazzi's underestimation of Lecter's menace plays off what the audience already knows of him, to fill these scenes with suspense and terror. Furthermore, the backstory of Mason Verger, to the film's benefit, briefly provides it with hypnotizing dialogue reminiscent of The Silence of the Lambs. Still, Scott's direction overly influences the audience by cutting in and out of a graphically violent and overly stylized flashback. In fact, much of the film's over-the-top violence only functions to shock and disgust its viewers. Unfortunately, the film's greatest weaknesses are its main characters. Due to the book's contradictory characterization of Clarice, Jodie Foster declined to return to the role. Hopkins, too, had mixed feelings on the book, but committed himself to the role after approving one of the script's later drafts. Helen Hunt, Ashley Judd, Gillian Anderson, Hilary Swank, Angelina Jolie, and Cate Blanchett were all considered to play Clarice. Ultimately, the role went to Julianne Moore. Despite now being an experienced FBI agent, Clarice's character is made ridiculously ineffectual, overshadowed by the film's larger personalities. Halfway through the film, Hannibal himself is quickly subverted to the role of madman on the loose in his obsession over Clarice. Thankfully, the script avoided the implausible ending of the book, in which its two leads become romantically entangled. Still, Lecter's escape into thin air left the film, and the franchise, back where it started. Despite its incongruities in character and story, Hannibal was a box office success. Without further material to adapt, the franchise would soon look backward in order to move forward, readapting Red Dragon, but this time with fan favorite Anthony Hopkins. Fans can support my channel by donating on PayPal. And don't forget to subscribe and check out my other videos.